In today's edition, we have an interesting topic and we have an expert speaker. So setting up the ground rules first. So we'd request people to keep your audio off and video on off mode when the presenter is actually speaking. You may have some doubts like when the speaker is actually speaking. We request you to type out your questions in chat. So once the speaker has finished her presentation, then we will have an interactive discussion where we can take up some queries. So we welcome Dr. Poornima Bhola, who will be chairing today's session of Road to Recovery. It is over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Sivakumar. So it's really my pleasure today to introduce our expert speaker. She has an impressive track record in the area of being part of an organization that has hired employees with disabilities for a very, very long time. So I'm just going to share a brief introduction about her, but what we're really looking forward to is her talk and sharing of her experiences. So Ms. Aradhana Lal is a TEDx speaker. She leads sustainability and ESG initiatives at Lemon Tree Hotels. This includes planet, environment, and people, and inclusion and diversity. The company's strategy is to sort of build an inclusive employee base. And what is truly impressive is that they've been hiring employees with disabilities in a systematic manner for about 15 years. And their goal is to take this from the current 14% to 30% in the financial year 2025 to 26. So you can see that they've set very clear targets for this goal. Today, Lemon Tree Hotels employs about 350 employees with disabilities and about 500 economically and socially marginalized employees, making it a total of over 14% of opportunity-deprived Indians out of the total employee base. Aradhana Lal co-leads, recruitment of these employees with disabilities through the network of 87 hotels and about 8,500 rooms in 54 destinations. And she leads a lot of the new developments and initiatives in the disability space. She has over the past 9 years run trials with people with Down syndrome and autism, as well as visual impairment and low vision. This is in addition to the speech and hearing impaired and orthopedically handicapped employees the company already hires on a regular basis. Aradhana has an MBA degree from IIM Ahmedabad. She has over 29 years of experience in sales and marketing, corporate communications, and in sustainability. She was earlier Vice President, Sales and Marketing at Lemon Tree Hotels. She's also previously been Sales and Operations Manager at Hindustan Lever Network, formerly known as Aviance, the multi-level marketing business of Hindustan Unilever. Prior to this, she was with the Taj Group of Hotels. So as you can see, she really has a sustained track record in this area. I've heard some of her talks online, and I can say there's really a lot to learn. On another note, I would like to mention that Aradhana Lal was my senior at college. And sometimes you have people who go to college with you and you already know when you meet them then that they're going to be making a meaningful contribution. And so it's really a dual pleasure for me to be able to invite her today and to have her here with us to share about her work and her experiences. So welcome, Aradhana Lal, and we'll please do begin sharing your experiences with us. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Poornima, for that warm welcome and that profile description. Sounds a little scary when you hear it, but it's true, actually. That's what I have done and have been doing. So I'm going to share the presentation on the screen first from my end. In case you feel there's a challenge of connectivity, just let me know. One sec. Sometimes we have an issue with the Wi-Fi, but mostly it's all right. Tell me you can see the presentation on a slideshow mode. I'm just changing it. One sec. Is it visible now?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. So thank you firstly to Nimhans for asking me to be here today. And the fact that you're focusing only on the Lemon Tree story is pretty awesome for us. And you want to hear what we've done. So I'm going to tell you in as much detail as I can in this time period and allow enough time in the end for question answers. And there'll be a short 5-minute video which I'll ask Poornima to share once I finish talking. Let's just get into it. So one of the reasons that people, one of the questions actually that people ask us a lot of is, why do you do inclusion? Why do you hire people with disability? What's the reason? So our explanation is that we actually see business benefits. We call it business sense. Now, there are two aspects to this. One is just looking at it purely as business, and one is looking at it from a nation building lens. Under the business lens, there are two more aspects. One is employee benefits and the other is brand benefits. When we say brand, we mean customers. So let's look at it from employees. You allow the company to access a bigger talent pool when you hire people with disability or people from economically and socially marginalized backgrounds who are normally not in the consideration set for a typical hotel company. Hotel companies, as you know, they go to hotel schools, aviation schools, sometimes even just regular colleges, and hire team members from there. We do that as well, but we have now, for 15 years, addressed a much larger talent pool, and it makes recruiting a little easier for us. There is a sense of creativity that gets heightened in the team. Now, you will ask how. Actually, you may not, because many of you are professionals in this field. So you will understand that when a person is deaf or a person is autistic or someone has Down syndrome, they are negotiating their whole life, keeping in mind that particular disability or that absence of an ability or whatever anybody wants to call it. And due to this, their other abilities are sharper, stronger, better, and sometimes even more creative. We've seen this very clearly with our deaf colleagues. We've seen it with our autistic colleagues, our low vision colleagues, anyone you can look at. We notice that they sometimes find solutions to problems that we hadn't been able to see ourselves. And I'll tell you more about that later. But basically, creativity gets increased. The third aspect, which is the most important for any company, and if you ask an HR head, they will absolutely agree, is that any company's goal is to keep increasing employee engagement. It's not just employee satisfaction, it's actually engagement. So how does that get registered through this effort? You know, we've been participating in the Great Place to Work survey for a good 10, 12 years, and we have appeared in the top 100, and our most recent rank was number 4 in India and number 12 in Asia, which is pretty incredible for a startup and a new hotel company like Lemon Tree. And when they do the survey with employees and they ask them, why do you keep working in Lemon Tree? They give two answers. One is they say we grow very fast. That's because our company has grown very fast. We are now 87 hotels, 54 cities. They also say we feel very satisfied and very proud to be part of a company that is so inclusive. They even go a step further. They say, yes, I get to teach these colleagues many things, but I often learn from them. How powerful is that? Imagine they're saying that from somebody whose society actually wasn't giving a chance to, we gave a chance, they were able to work, they were able to bring out their best. And then the other team members who don't have a disability are saying, I am learning from them. I think it's just absolutely amazing. So they feel very satisfied and they feel very proud to be in such a company. The last aspect from the employee lens is reduced attrition. Now, this is a good one. Normally in the hotel business, people leave hotel companies within 1 to 2 years and they move to another hotel company, and sometimes they move out of the industry also. In the case of our employees with disability and our employees from economically and socially marginalized background, the attrition numbers are half the company numbers. So the company attrition is about 50 to 60%. That means at the end of any year, more than half our employees have left and we have a new set of people. In the case of the disability segment, what we call the ODI segment, actually opportunity deprived segment, there the attrition is somewhere between 25 to 30%. Now, this is very helpful for a company. A, it reduces the cost of getting new hires. And also it allows people who have understood your processes, who are well trained, who can perform their tasks well. It allows the service levels to be maintained and remain of a certain quality. Otherwise, when new team members come, it takes time to settle down and get the service absolutely right. So it really works for the company. Now look at it from a guest lens or a consumer lens. People who've never stayed at a Lemon Tree before, they might have heard about our inclusion work. So they may say, all right, let me not stay at XYZ hotel and let me go and stay at Lemon Tree. That means we get a competitive advantage because they're willing to try. some of them or many of them will come back again. They will return because they like the service, they like the place, and that's basically loyalty. There are a few of them who help us build the brand. They become brand ambassadors because they recommend us to friends, family, colleagues. Some of them even go and write on TripAdvisor, Make My Trip, etc., that I have stayed at so-and-so Lemon Tree and I got great service, and they start describing what they experienced. Sometimes they even name the staff member, which is really awesome. So these are the ideas or the reasons we do it from a business lens. Now look at it as a nation-building activity. If Lemon Tree wants to be part of this country's growth, which it certainly is, then we should represent a slice of society in our company. If society has people of different abilities, then why not our company? That's why we do it. What happens? We give an opportunity to those who normally don't get it or have a lesser chance, and this helps them live with dignity, independence, and self-reliance. Now, this slide actually is very important because we share this with other companies. We are very open about sharing our best practices with other companies, whether they are hotel companies, restaurant companies, bank, IT, it doesn't matter which sector. We've been doing a lot of sharing and dialogue and discussion with leadership teams in different companies. We've been doing this for almost 10 years now. So we always want to share this point of view with them about the business benefits so that they also feel encouraged and are clear that it is a good step for their company to take. That's why this is a very important bit of information. There is actually a model that we have developed, which is a 7-pillar model. It flows in a sequence, but sometimes I think the sequence can start anywhere, actually. We have numbered it as 1, 2, 3, but when you start thinking through the process, you could just start anywhere. So let's take number 1. The idea that it should be part of the business model. Inclusion should be the HR strategy and no matter of charity. It is not an idea of charity at all. This needs to come from the leadership, from the person who heads the company. So whether it's your chairman, your MD, your CEO, that person must be clear that hiring people with disability or hiring people from economically and socially marginalized backgrounds, training them well, making them ready for the job will lead to great service and great employee engagement. They have to believe in this idea. Otherwise, it will be very hard to make this a successful initiative in a company-wide way. Then this idea needs to cascade to the leadership team. It doesn't have to only be the agenda of the head of HR or the head of sustainability and ESG. It must be the agenda and, in fact, part of the key result areas and part of the performance management system for all the heads of functions, whether it is operations, sales, finance, admin, marketing, engineering, safety, security. It doesn't matter which department it is, but the person who heads each function must equally understand and believe in this idea that inclusion is part of the business model. So that's the first pillar of this whole effort. The second one is to have a dedicated resource. In the case of Lemon Tree, it is myself and a colleague in HR. So our job is to focus on diversity and inclusion, to build partnerships with other NGOs, with government departments, with other companies, and to grow the whole program. So that dedication and that focus is required. The third step is about sensitization. Now, I think all of you who are on this webinar today, you all are professionals in this space, or you all are caregivers. So either way, you are very, very familiar with the idea of disability or the idea of special needs, I would say. And you don't really need to be sensitized. But if you look at a common person, often they don't even understand what is disability and what are the different types. And they may think it's a social taboo, in fact, and they may not take it very seriously. Our whole idea of sensitization is that we want to brief all our team members, those who don't have disability, that why does Lemon Tree do this? We explain the same thing I was talking about in the previous slide. And we also try to teach them about each disability. So when we started 15 years ago with deaf, then after 2 years, we brought physical handicap. After another 1 or 2 years, we brought low vision. Then another 3 years later, we brought acid survivors, then autism, then Down syndrome, and so on. Each time we introduce a new disability type, we want to train and brief our employees what that disability is all about. And as a team member or that person's supervisor, what do you need to do so that that person can understand their job well, they can be trained well, and they can fit in the team as a team member. The sensitization covers the overview aspect and the detailed aspect of each disability. The fourth pillar is job mapping. I would say this is absolutely fundamental. What this means is that every role, so take a hotel company like ours, we have departments like front office, housekeeping, food and beverage service, which is the folks you see in the restaurants, and food and beverage production. Those are the chefs, the guys in the kitchen. Then you have engineering, HR, sales, and so on. So for every department, we take the entry-level position, the role, and we look at all the tasks. Typically, any role has about 25 or 30 tasks. Then we map this against each disability. So first we did it for deaf, then for physical handicap, then low vision, then autism, and so on. In this process, we need the help of NGO partners because they are the ones who understand disability very well. You know, we are hoteliers. We don't understand it that well. So there is a very detailed observation process that takes place over a number of days. You may do it for 10 days, you may do it for more. And on each day, you're observing maybe for 4 hours, 5 hours or more. And you observe it at different times of the day. As you know, a hotel operation is 24 hours. So we have to see what occurs in the early morning hours at the front desk, in the coffee shop, in housekeeping. We have to see what occurs in the afternoon around lunchtime. We have to see what occurs in the evening or the night. So appropriately, they have to come and observe all parts of the day. And that's when they can arrive at any role. Is it suitable for that disability? Or are there too many tasks where that person will not be able to perform? Which means that person's disability will come in the way of that person doing the task. Because then you're setting that person up for failure. It doesn't make sense. So I'll give you an example of autism. We did job mapping for the coffee shop role, and we did job mapping for the housekeeping role, the role of a room boy. They also spent a little time in both the areas. We just wanted to understand and observe during the internship, how will it work? Our final assessment was that in the coffee shop, there are too many people present, and they are often all new faces, the guests basically. And it is a defined space. You know, a coffee shop or a restaurant is a 4 walls and it's a space, right? So here, their level of comfort was not the same as it was when they did the role of a room boy on the floor, where they worked more than 50% of the time independently. At other times, they were with their buddy or their manager or their supervisor who was guiding them, helping them. And that person they become very familiar with. They get to know that person. And their interaction with guests is minimal. So that unfamiliar faces becomes a very sort of low occurrence. So the comfort level of being part of the housekeeping team on the floors was much higher than being part of the food and beverage service team in the coffee shop. That's how we were able to draw that conclusion. So that's the idea of job mapping. It's a very detailed process, but I'm not sharing that much information right now. It's not relevant. The fifth pillar is kind of obvious. I've already mentioned it 2-3 times that we do need partners. We do need NGOs. We need specialists, job coaches, also partnerships with other companies, because many companies today in India and around the world are hiring people with disability. And sometimes we can learn some good practices from them as well. It's not that only we are sharing, we learn from others as well. The sixth pillar is about running of pilots or running traineeships. This was very, very relevant for Down syndrome, slow learner, and autism. And here the goal is you need to monitor the training process, you need to monitor the outcomes, you need to review. So we did this in a very detailed manner. I'm going to share 2-3 slides on this just after this, so you will know more about it. Then the seventh step or the seventh pillar is scaling up. You know, just doing things as a trial or a pilot is not enough for a company. If you don't scale up, if you don't go national, then what was the purpose of your doing this activity? Then you're not really inclusive. Because you scale up and you spread it across your whole group, in our case, 87 hotels, then it becomes a national effort and it becomes a part of your company's culture. That's what we have done at Lemon Tree. So very briefly, this is the 7-pillar model. I'll deep dive into a few ideas now. I'm talking about different disabilities. I know at Nimhans you focus on the intellectual challenges, but I'm going to talk about, give examples across different disabilities. So let's look at SHI, speech and hearing impaired. Now, naturally, the guests in India, some of them may know Indian Sign Language, most of them don't know. So when they arrive at our hotel, and if they're not familiar that some people are going to be deaf, and they don't know how to recognize the deaf person, it's important that we should communicate very quickly. So we use this introductory card. It's a card on display. It's worn around the neck of the employee. And it simply says, "Hi, I'm Deepak and I work at Citrus Cafe. I can't speak or hear, but if you write down your request, I'll be very happy to serve you." So what you're trying to tell the guest in 10 seconds, the person who doesn't know, that I am deaf, and therefore if you speak to me, I won't be able to hear you actually. So please write it down. This helps in setting the expectation of the guest. So these are basically workplace adjustments, or it's a workplace readiness tool, so that the people with disability can work with ease in the company. That's why we do it. We also change the standard operating procedure. So I'll give you an example. The menus in any hotel are typically detailed and long, and they have different sections. So in our case, we decided to number the menus. The reason was, if the guest has to write down what he wants to order, suppose he wants pasta with a white sauce with mushroom. Now, instead of writing that whole description that is given in the menu, suppose that item is called number 14, and they just have to write down, "I want one portion of number 14, then the order is very easy to write down for the guest. Otherwise, they'll be writing down details. So numbered menus don't happen in hotels ever. They normally happen in quick service restaurants. So this is a learning we took from them, and we said, let's apply it in our case as well. In the case of deaf, if you run a group, that's true of any disability actually, they're very good with SMSing, WhatsApping, and even if you do audio visuals in sign language, they will answer and they'll understand the process very quickly. Let's look at OH, orthopedic handicap. It's important for a hotel to have accessible back areas. Our front of the house areas, our porch, our lobby, restaurants, rooms, and all that, they are all accessible because we design our hotels as per universal access design guidelines. But sometimes hotels in the back area may not consider these issues. So if I want to hire someone on a wheelchair, I have to make sure that when they enter my hotel from the time office, they go to the locker room, they go to the cafe, they go to their work area, any corridor they're going, suppose it's a person on a wheelchair, there has to be the ability to turn the wheelchair at corners, the ability to go through a door. All of this has to be considered. So therefore, building an accessible area is important, back area. And naturally, we'll assign roles where the person doesn't have to keep on moving around. In hotels, what happens? Mostly roles are standing roles, in fact. So for a person with disability, we have to consider these issues, that how will that person physically be? Will they be standing, sitting? Will they be supported by some equipment? What will happen? And therefore, we must give roles that have minimal movement. Let's talk about Down syndrome and autism, which is the area that you all work with. We have developed a traineeship model in this case. The idea was that we won't hire them outright. We will first run a 6-month to 1-year traineeship, an internship basically. And once with the operating team feels that this person or this trainee has understood all the tasks that we know they can perform, there are 2-3 tasks we know they cannot perform. So in the case of Down syndrome, because it's an intellectual challenge, we don't expect them to make a bill because it will be too complex for them to choose the items, see the total, make sure the tax is applied and all of that. It's too complicated. So there are tasks like that, 3 or 4 tasks that are not on the job list of a person with Down syndrome, but all the other tasks are. So when the manager is giving inputs during the traineeship, along with us and HR and everybody, we are able to tell the trainee as well as the trainee's parents that, you need to work harder on this area. And these are the areas that you have understood. That's the idea of the traineeship model. We made an adjustment on the timings. Now, as I mentioned, a hotel is a 24-hour operation. The morning shift works from 7:30 to 4:30. The afternoon shift normally works from 3 p.m. to midnight. And the night shift is from 11 p.m. to some 7 a.m. the next day or 8 a.m. So one of the advice we got from our NGO's partner, Muskan NGO in Delhi, was that we should not assign night shifts to people with Down syndrome or autism because there are certain physicalities, there are certain biological aspects of individuals who have either of these disabilities, which won't allow them to perform well if they don't sleep well, So, and day after day, if they don't sleep well, if you do a night shift, you have to do it for a week at least, right? So the advice was that allow them to do morning shift and allow them to do afternoon shift, which is adjusted. Adjusted means instead of 3 p.m. to midnight, we made the time for them 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. Now remember one thing, When we are doing hiring of people with disability, it is part of the business model. That means there's going to be no unnecessary concessions. Like, we will not tell a person with Down syndrome, okay, you don't work 9 hours. Everybody else in the company will work 9 hours. You only work 7 hours. This is not an option, because if you do something which is seemingly unfair like this, it's not tenable. You can't sustain it over time. So we adjusted the afternoon shift. We pulled it back by 2 hours. So instead of 3 p.m., they had to report at 1 p.m. Therefore, instead of 12 midnight, they could leave at 10 p.m. As simple as that. And they are doing as much work as anybody else. We also made revisions in the standard phrases. You know, in a hotel, you're expected to say things in a certain way, a certain style. So it's a little complex for a person with Down syndrome or autism. So we simplified it to very, very short phrases, 2 words, 3 words, so that it's easy for them to speak when they need to. They don't have to speak too much, but whenever they need to. Take a look at the last item on the right side, this picture which is there. It's called the Me Book. Now, in the case of Down syndrome, as you all are aware, there is a challenge with memory. Things can get forgotten. So this is a memory aid, the Me Book. It's there for each and every employee who has Down syndrome. There's a time mentioned, a task is mentioned, and there's a photograph of that boy or girl doing that task. The reason we put these individual photographs was it had to be highly personalized. Otherwise, it's hard for them to know that it's their job. This way, the person identifies, oh yeah, this is my Me Book and this is what I'm supposed to do. So we've done a similar Me Book for a morning shift and a similar one for the afternoon shift, and they can carry it with them. Otherwise, can you imagine if a team has 5 people with Down syndrome and every half an hour or so, suppose they get a little confused that what do I have to do next? If they keep going to the manager, imagine how many questions he'll have to answer. It's very hard. So the Me Book allows them to have a self-reliant way of reminding themselves, oh, okay, this is what I need to do next. So that's a very important tool for us. Of course, in the case of visually impaired and low vision, which you see at the bottom half of the slide, we must have software which is accessible, and even our training content and all our standard operating procedures must be accessible to someone who's visually impaired. So that's an important aspect. Now let's talk about specifically the Down syndrome and autism traineeships. I've already mentioned quite a few aspects. I'll talk about more, and I'm going to show you some very short videos. These are 10 seconds or 15 seconds. I'll request you to bear with me. These are not marketing videos. These are not brand videos. These are internal videos. So they're not going to be slick and very well and neatly done. They're going to be just working videos. So please understand that, because they're trying to highlight a point. So how does this model work on the ground? Firstly, the job mapping. I told you we have to look at a role and all the tasks concerned and see if that disability will stop the person from doing it. So we looked at roles which was there in public, it's all right, but with a large amount of independent work. So the view we had was that for Down syndrome and slow learners, the food and beverage service role, which means the staff in the coffee shop or in the restaurant, that role can be played by a person with Down syndrome. I'm just going to show you a table setup AV. I'll do it a little later. Let me just run through the slides. It'll be easier. Otherwise, I'll have to keep coming in and going out. So I'll show you one AV which talks about how the Down syndrome team member is doing a table setup. What you will notice there is the very simple and step-by-step task that it is. And once we teach it to them and we make them practice, they are able to do it very easily. In the case of housekeeping, in the case of autism, the predictability is required to be very high. I had mentioned earlier why the housekeeping role was a little better, less public exposure, more independent work. Also, housekeeping tasks are very clear, SOPs are very clear, and they're repetitive. That creates a sense of comfort for the person who's autistic. I'll show you what's called a TCM setup. TCM is tea, coffee, milk. So you will see the ease and the predictability with which that boy is placing those items in the guest room. I'll show you that in a bit. We had to identify the trainees for these traineeships. So in the case of Down syndrome, we wanted people who were verbal, and even if their speech was not 100% clear, if they were able to speak just a few sentences, it's fine with us. Now, I'd like you to consider, for any company to bring in a person with Down syndrome, if they change their hiring process and they say somewhat clear speech is all right, that's a very important step. Because otherwise, why would a company say somewhat clear speech? They would always say we want the person to be very fluent in English, very fluent in Hindi, or if there's a local language requirement. But nobody is going to really say, especially in a hotel, imagine, that's somewhat clear speech. But that's the adjustment you make because it's not so relevant to the service. It doesn't matter. Then in the case of autism, you all know better than I do that autism is a spectrum. So we need to look at candidates who are towards the high functioning side, because if you look at candidates towards the low functioning side, and especially those who are non-verbal, and you put them in such a public role like a hotel, it will make them absolutely miserable. It will not serve them well, and it will certainly not serve the hotel well. So we have to be a little careful in this case so that it's easy for them to adjust. Now, what's important is this. We have to learn as a company. Lemon Tree has to learn, our training department, our operations department has to learn what is the style of training and how shall we plan our workplace activities so that this employee can come in and be a part of the team very easily. The learning is for us. We have to learn how best to work with that team member. And of course, sensitization, I already mentioned. We have to teach our other colleagues who don't have disability what is Down syndrome, what is autism, and if this member is in your team, how shall you communicate with them? Because if they speak very fast or they speak in complex sentences, you know as well as I do that that trainee will not understand. If they raise their voice and they yell and they shout, neither the Down syndrome person or the autistic person will be able to cope with that. There's no point. It will be a total loss. It's true of anybody actually, but let's talk about Down syndrome and autism. So we really do teach our team members very well the do's and don'ts for them towards a person who has a special need of a particular kind. Then planning. I'll show you a third video right now, which is about an inclusive briefing. You know, hotels typically are very standard operating procedure oriented. Everything is planned. But when we started working with autism and Down syndrome, we truly learned the meaning of planning. Like we used to think we were very organized, but we had to rethink because we had to do so much of advanced planning that otherwise that team member doesn't feel comfortable. You can't tell him, okay, tomorrow do like this, or today we're changing the plan. You cannot do that. You have to have a plan and know it at least a week or 15 days out. So I'll show you an inclusive briefing, which has people who are deaf and people who have Down syndrome in an operating team. And this is the daily briefing that takes place. So it's very nice to see how that integrated thing works. Of course, timetable and schedules are absolutely crucial when it comes to planning. I was telling you about the Me book already. There's a concept called practice hour. So for Down syndrome, we felt that even when the traineeship gets over, say it takes 6 months, 9 months, how much ever time, and we are ready to hire the person, he's part of the team now. Because of the memory challenge, we would still like to, on a daily basis, we say practice hour, but it's only 20 minutes actually. The manager or the supervisor will conduct a short training and a practice session of the same task that he's doing every day. So pouring water, setting up the table, clearing the table, bringing some bread or roti or whatever. So we reteach it and we make them re-practice it so that on any day of the year, they don't get a chance to forget because you're making them practice. And of course, there's a rules document. You know, when you bring in people with special needs, it's not like they can run amok or they can behave in any which way they like. They cannot. They have to also follow some decorum and some system and some professionalism. So there are certain do's and don'ts. We put it in very simple language, share it with that trainee and also with the trainee's parents. Because, you know, in the case of an intellectual challenge, it's really important to involve the caretakers and the father, mother, brother, sister, because they can explain and re-explain to that trainee very easily. And, the trainee is open to listening also. In the case of autism, we can write documents like the ways of working or the rules document in a little more detail because they are able to read quite easily, in fact. Some of them can read very well, but still there's a certain style of writing. You don't write as you do in normal hotel training material. You write a little differently, you put some images and so on. Also for autism, I think those of you who work with autism or have an autistic person in your family, you know this very well. Signage, meaning anywhere in the premises where certain activities can be done, it is better to put signage so that that person with autism feels a sense of comfort and predictability that, okay, if I go here, this room is meant for this. Or if I go to this section of the floor, this is what I can do. So example, we have something called the calming area. I think you must be familiar with that. So we make arrangements for this on every floor. We make arrangements near the coffee shop, wherever it is required. So that if a person who's autistic experiences stress or feels that maybe an incident is about to come on, he has an option. And the special educator from the NGO who works with autism, we work with Action for Autism, AFA, they teach those trainees that you have to take a step back, you have to go to the calming area, breathe, and whatever is that person's technique, maybe that person wants to rock in the chair, maybe that person wants to hear a bit of music or whatever it is, so that that person can bring back their balance and bring back their sense of confidence, and then maybe even go back to work after 10-15 minutes. So it's quite a nice technique, I feel. So signage is an important aspect of that process as well, that if they know where to go, what to do, they are very comfortable and sorted. And of course, I just want to reiterate this. The inclusion program at Lemon Tree, I want to be very clear, especially to the caregivers, because you might be thinking that let me approach Lemon Tree for my ward or my family member. There is no charity involved in this. The expectation is that that person works full-time, 9 hours a day, 6 days a week, and whatever the tasks are, which we have done in the job mapping, they perform them all. It's not that I don't feel like doing this or I don't want to do this. It doesn't work like that. So we work within the business model requirement. This is something to remember. So if a person who has special needs has the right to get a job, he also has the responsibility to perform the job as the company requires. So just keep that in your mind. Now I'll share a few pictures, then I'll show you those 3 working videos I want to show you. They're all 10-15 seconds each. I will tell you again what those videos are about when I get there. So this is a person who works in the revenue management and distribution team. She's a person who's an acid survivor. So you will notice she carries herself in a certain way, she dresses in a certain way so that she is comfortable being out in society. Her job involves a computer and a phone, and she can handle it very well. She doesn't need to meet guests face to face every day, because imagine each time she meets, she might get a reaction, which we cannot control. Now, we cannot sensitize the guests. Like when you see an acid survivor on our premises, please don't react. We cannot do it. So this kind of a role works very well for this person. Here are 2 autistic colleagues in housekeeping. One of them is doing dusting, the one on the left, and the one on the right is doing the tea, coffee, milk setup. I'll be showing you that video right now. Down syndrome colleagues in the coffee shop. One of them is placing the juice, and 2 of them are doing the napkin folding. This is a person in finance. If you see, he's got a hearing aid. He's hard of hearing. Now, education-wise, we are not fussy in a lot of the roles, but there are some roles like finance, HR, engineering, where if you don't know the technical matters, you won't be able to perform that role. You'll be lost. So a guy in finance must be a BCom, otherwise he won't understand. So this boy is. Here are colleagues with physical handicap. So there's one person at the front desk who doesn't have a right arm. There's a front desk team member who's a wheelchair user, and now he's escorting the guests to the room. And the bottom right is a person in housekeeping who uses crutches, and he has a supervisory role. So he uses the computer, the phone, and some logbooks. That thing he's going through in front of him is a logbook. And he talks to the housekeeping team staff as and when, and he assigns tasks to them. His role is a supervisory role. So that's how it works. Here are our colleagues who are deaf. Basically, they are in all areas. So this is food and beverage on the top left. The chef is a hearing chef. He's using sign language to communicate with the deaf staff member. The top right is in the uniform room. Again, that's a team member on the right, and the boy who's handing out the uniforms is a deaf boy, and they're talking in sign language. The bottom left is a boy serving a guest. This guest, of course, was trying to learn. So she was trying to say thank you, basically. Bottom right is again a boy in the room boy, the one who goes and cleans the room and makes the bed. One of the things we learned, by the way, let me give you an interesting input. Our room boys who are deaf were able to clean about 22 to 23 rooms a day versus our hearing boys who are cleaning about 15, 16 rooms a day. So we realized pretty early that there was an operational efficiency of about 15%. We are still trying to understand how and why. Our guess is because those who are deaf don't have the opportunity to keep having a chit-chat conversation. They may talk to each other, but they do it in sign language and do it very fast. versus a hearing person who may stop 3-4 times a day and end up having some conversations with different people and therefore lose some time. So you also observe sometimes operational deficiencies with those who have special needs. Here's the team, just some colleagues with Down syndrome and their managers, and the bottom right has Down syndrome and deaf, both, and a manager. That's all of us, the integrated team. I just want you to see that there are different disabilities. There are men, there are women, there are people with and without disability, all mixed. Now I'm going to show you those 3 short videos. 1 second. So the first one is the Down syndrome team member doing a table setup. There'll be some ambient sound. You can just ignore the sound. As I told you, it's not a professional recording. It's just for a working recording. Take a look at the simplicity of the task and the precision with which he's going about it. So just keep your eyes on his task. Yeah. I'm just playing it. I'm going to reduce the sound because it's a little noisy. It doesn't matter. Okay, so what you saw here was, you were able to see, right, Poornima?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So what you observed here was that this person was going about it step by step. You also noticed that he was a little slow. So that's an interesting situation. The coffee shop manager will always plan that the Down syndrome boys and girls are setting up tables a little in advance of the requirement, which means if it's a very busy time and there are lots of people, and as soon as one guest gets up, the other guest is expecting to sit down very fast, we will not ask a Down syndrome boy to do the table setup at that time. We might ask a deaf boy, we might ask a boy without any disability, because we know they can move faster. And also remember, now in a post-COVID world, it's not just about cleaning something, we also have to sanitize. So there's additional steps, basically. So planning the schedule of the coffee shop and how best to utilize a person with Down syndrome in different aspects at different times of the day, this is what leads to success. The second video I'm going to show is the boy in the room. So he's part of housekeeping. He's a room boy. He's doing the setup of tea, coffee, milk. Just look at the fact that he's counting. So he's saying, okay, the Darjeeling tea bags, so many, Assam tea bags, so many, green tea, sugar, sugar-free, whatever. So just notice that. Just see the flow. And of course, he's counting in his mind. So this is a task that is required to be done in every room, definitely once a day, sometimes more than once a day. And what may be considered to be a little boring for somebody, for a person who's autistic, it's not boring. It's predictable and well understood. So in fact, it provides a sense of comfort. Now I'm showing you the third video, which is the inclusive briefing. So there is a manager who's a person without disability. There are 7-8 people standing around. Some have disability, some don't. and he's telling the performance of the day, he's doing something. Doesn't matter that you can't hear his voice too well, don't worry about that. Just look at the way the involvement of everybody comes. You'll also notice the use of Indian Sign Language, because there are 1 or 2 deaf boys in that group. So how you have to work in an integrated way. One more thing he does, there are tasks that get assigned to different team members. Even the Down syndrome team members are given a task where they are checking something or they are supervising something. So in this case, they're checking and supervising the hygiene of each person. So they will look at the clothes, the shoes, the hands. They will check if the person has the pen and that notebook with them and all that. And if they don't, they are very frank in telling that person that you don't have it right. So just observe these actions right now. Don't worry about the sound too much.
We are not able to hear anything.
You don't need to listen. You're just observing that he's asking something around the group, and some of them spoke up and some of them used their hands. That was Indian Sign Language. You're just observing the flow. You don't have to hear the content. Now he's doing the hygiene check. So see, this is a boy with Down syndrome. See how he inspects everybody. So we just want you to understand that when you want to include a person in a process, it's not just about make him do his work. You have to make it teamwork oriented. So by telling a boy with Down syndrome that you're going to be responsible for whether everyone is well groomed or not and their uniform is appropriate or not, it's a sense of great pride and great contribution to that person. This is just one task. There are other tasks also which we make them supervise. So this is what I wanted to show you and present. I think, Poornima, can you show the 5-minute AV of Lemon Tree? Now this AV is professionally done and you will enjoy it. You'll be able to hear clearly. You'll be able to see everything. Take a look because it encapsulates all the work I just spoke about in diversity. And it also a little bit captures our work in environment-friendly practices. And then we can enter Q&A after that. Poornima, I will stop sharing if you can take the screen.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to request Akash, my team member, to share the video.
Oh, ma'am, ma'am, you have to stop your screen share. Then
I'm just going to. I'm trying to do that. Just give me a second.
I can do also from our side.
You can stop. You stop it.
Can you see our screen now?
Yes.
VLC program is running, right? There are. Okay, I'm going to play this video.
Just start from the beginning and keep the volume audible.
Yeah. Is it audible?
No, there's no sound right now. Check your volume on YouTube. You can start again. No, the music is still not coming.
Sir, while doing the screen share, can you stop the screen, reshare it with 2 check boxes at the bottom? Just click on those 2 check boxes, then we'll be able to hear the sounds.
Okay, please do that. Yeah, now the sound is coming, but go to the beginning. Thanks.
जब ये छोटा था तो मुझे पता नहीं था कि ऑटिज्म होता क्या है। जैसे जैसे ये बड़ा होता गया मेरी टेंशन बढ़ती गई।
Person with autism has a difficulty in social and communication skills. If we see कि कितना अच्छे से वो डस्टिंग और सारा रूम बनाते हैं, बट वो रूम बनाने के पीछे जो चीज़ें होती हैं वो बहुत सी मेहनत की जाती है उनके साथ। जो भी एक टास्क है उसको SOP को भी बहुत छोटा छोटा ब्रेक करके और उसको सिखाना, एक मैनुअल, डिफरेंट मैनुअल बनाया जाता है
जो कि नॉर्मल बच्चे नहीं कर पाते। ये इतना कॉन्फिडेंट हो गए कि मम्मा मैं हूँ आपके साथ, मैं करूँगा।
आई थिंक सो कोई भी इतना परफेक्टली काम नहीं कर सकता जितना वो कर रहा है घर में।
आज मैं गर्व फील करती हूँ कि ऐसा बच्चा मुझे मिला है जो
Thank you, Akash, for sharing that. So I'm sure all of us who are here are just, going to stay for a few moments in silence while we sort of think back on this such an inspirational and educative talk. And what really struck me is the amount of effort, the amount of thought, planning, and sustained effort that has gone into it. This is not something that one can just decide to do as a tick in the box or as an overnight exercise. And I'm sure it has evolved over time as well. I can see that there are many compliments flowing into the chat box. My colleague, Dr. Sivakumar, had to leave for another meeting, so I'm going to take up some of the questions on his behalf from the chat and also perhaps share some of my own. So thank you so much, Aradhana. I know you're so busy, but you immediately agreed to do this talk at such short notice. So thank you very, very much for that.
No problem.
So I think you would have already seen there are a few questions about expanding the scope of employing persons with other mental health vulnerabilities. And I noticed you mentioned you worked with persons with ADHD, and I wonder if you can share anything about that. Was it very different from, did you have to do some of these tasks in a different way?
Not the task really, but just the maybe the speed and the level of patience that you have to display, both with IDD, autism, ADHD, all of it. So SLD is something new for us right now, and we've been also trying to understand it because, with SLD, what happens is the intellectual capacity is not compromised. It's the style in which they receive information, the way they learn, the way they pay attention. So it's a little tricky. And I have tried to go to 2-3 schools who work closely with SLD and also a training organization. You might be familiar with Geet. I'm just spelling her surname right now. So to observe and understand that what is the way to have a person who has a special learning disability, how to bring them into an organization. So it's early stages on that piece right now.
I think what really struck me through your presentation is that you really go down to the micro details, each process, and then how it flows together. So, if you've begun this work with ADHD and now exploring SLD, I think that perhaps some of the questions from participants about, over time expanding the scope into other mental health vulnerabilities is perhaps something that you would consider adding as time.
We would. What happens is, in each case, we need an expert partner. It's very important because they know and understand that space. They can guide us on how it works. So if any organization who's part of this session today wishes to be that partner, then you can just, that person can mail me. I put my email ID right now on the chat. That person can mail me and we can have a dialogue separately, because that will take some discussion. It's a little complex, let's put it that way. If anyone wants to ask a question, maybe if you want to encourage that, you can do that.
I think, ma'am, there is one question in the chat box. Most of the questions ma'am has already answered through text. But one question, how do you tackle bullying and stigmatization by the normal body's co-workers? This is a question.
So the sensitization work that we do, it's an ongoing piece of work. It takes place in every hotel on a, if possible, monthly basis or whatever frequency we need to do. Also, we have various managers who are observing at all times to see that in case, despite sensitization, despite briefing, what if some bullying is taking place? And then we will counsel the person who is bullying. Now, you will be very intrigued to know that this bullying can happen. It will happen by a person without disability towards a person with disability. Here's the beauty. It can also happen by a person who's deaf towards a person who's autistic. It can happen by a person who's autistic towards a person who's deaf, because it's all about ego eventually, isn't it? So what we do is, whenever we observe and see something that is leading to behavior that's not acceptable, suppose there's violence, suppose there's raising of the voice, etc., then we will counsel that member, whether that person is with or without disability. And in fact, we might give them 2 opportunities to maybe slip a little bit and then no more. So I've had a situation where an autistic person had an episode, and he had been having episodes for some time, but initially he tried to harm himself. So we tried to protect him. We set him on leave for a while, etc. Then he was getting a little aggressive with others without harming anybody, actually, just verbally aggressive. The third time around, he kicked a person who emerged from an elevator with no provocation whatsoever. And that person happened to be a deaf boy. So, it just doesn't work. So then we had to tell his parents that he will have to leave the program, because despite the counseling and the warning. So what I'd like you to understand is that when we talk about do's and don'ts, they're equally important for those with or without disability. And if we say that we won't tolerate violence or misbehavior, we mean that towards each and every person. We will not mollycoddle and say, oh, poor fellow, he's autistic, he can't handle it. We don't get into all that. We will counsel, we will take the help of the NGO partner. None of this counseling happens by us because we don't even know how to do it. So we will take their help, we involve the parents, all that will happen. But the rules of the game are same, is what I want to say.
So I was interested in knowing how many NGO partners you have. Is it different for each of these disability sectors? How do you choose
because
and connect?
NGOs do not handle all disabilities. There are a few who make an attempt. So for instance, Youth for Jobs, Dr. Reddy's Foundation, a couple of more. They want to work with deaf, physical handicap, intellectual, all kinds of disabilities. But mostly we are seeing that there is a specialization that takes place. So we are dealing with maybe 70, 80 NGOs throughout India, because the purpose of interacting with the NGO is not just the support we need, it is also to source candidates. So it's more of a recruitment purpose. So for that reason, I don't know, 70, 80, maybe more, because every hotel of ours has local contacts and local NGOs. Some of those NGOs happen to be part of a national network. So for instance, Youth for Jobs, the person in Bangalore will also contact them, Bombay will also contact them, Ahmedabad will also contact them, so on and so forth. In the case of intellectual disability and autism, we need a strategic partner, which means it's not limited to just help us find candidates. No, they have to spend time on our premises as part of the traineeship. So that takes dialogue and agreement and so on. And there is no financial exchange. We are not paying that NGO anything, and that NGO is not paying us anything. We are coming together as two partners with a strategic objective. So same thing I was saying, if we look at any other mental vulnerabilities in the future, we will need the expertise to join our hands with us, basically.
So there's one question in the chat, if I could just address that one question. Does the government provide benefits to employers who provide this sort of supportive employment to persons with disabilities?
Yes, they do, but the process of receiving those benefits is too long and too complex. In the first 2-3 years, we tried something to do with Provident Fund and something, and then we just gave up. So we don't rely on any money.
And there's one more question about tackling absenteeism. So if you have employees who are not coming in frequently or things, so how do you address that?
It happens. So the same way in which you address it with a person who doesn't have disability and who does absenteeism, we do the same with a person who has disability. In this case, sometimes you might have to tell the folks also and say, listen, you can't just skip off when you feel like. You have to plan your day off, you have to plan leave and so on and so forth. And we are very, very firm about this. And even in the case of intellectual disability, I have spoken to parents myself a number of times saying, one more time you tell me that there's a puja in the house and he's not going to come today, you will leave the program, because the puja didn't get planned this morning. The puja was planned many, many days ago. So you should have planned it properly and taken a day of casual leave. It should have happened. So then they understood. Now they don't fool around. Your voice is muted, Poornima.
Sorry. Mr. Nalawala, would you like to unmute and ask the question yourself? Because I think you were trying to speak.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. One question that I had, Ms. Lal, for you is, does the ESG framework incentivize disability inclusion programs specifically?
When you say ESG framework, you mean lemon trees or do you mean the government? So
in general, what I meant was especially funding that happens on the basis of ESG.
Okay. So our CSR contribution, yes, we focus on NGOs who are into training and skilling people with disability. Our amount hasn't been very large because we are also a growing organization. So it's just been a few lakhs actually. And on account of the pandemic now, these 2 years, we've suffered heavy, heavy losses. So when you look at the 3-year average now, the amount is like so small that we have nothing to say really actually. So yes, we focus on that. And within our own company, certainly our focus and our looking at the key results, setting targets, all of that happens with respect to inclusion.
Well, my question was a little bit different actually. What I meant was, the funding that happens on the basis of ESG. All right.
Who's funding? Lemon Tree funding somebody else?
Yeah, meaning the funding
that's the
coming into Lemon Tree. That's what I meant.
So that's the CSR funding I was referring to, the 2% CSR funding. Right. So there is no other funding over and above the 2% CSR funding. And that is going definitely to, we have chosen 7 partners who are into skilling of people with disability for the purpose of employment.
Sure. Thank you so much.
I can see another question. I think the kind of intensive partnerships and collaborations you're doing with NGOs is definitely something quite interesting for many of our participants. So if you can share a little bit more about how you, build and strengthen these partnerships.
Yeah. So what we do is there are literally maybe 2 or 3 kinds of reasons to partner. The first reason is the most common one, which is to help find candidates of a particular disability. So that NGO then in the various cities where it is present, it will search for candidates, it will give them the initial training they need, like life skills, professional skills, and so on and so forth. They will not teach the lemon tree activities, they'll just teach general things, how to use a computer and so on and so forth. So they will make sure that they align that preparatory training in a way that it is useful for the hotel industry. And then they'll bring those candidates to us. So that's one reason to have a partnership. And this is the largest reason we have. The second is, in the case of deaf, we also need access to sign language interpreters sometimes, because for some events and some other detailed conversations, though we all know sign language. Here's another beautiful thing. Every employee in Lemon Tree knows English, knows Hindi, and knows Indian Sign Language. We are not experts. We speak a bit briefly. So when we need a more detailed conversation with colleagues who are deaf, we need access to interpreters. So we also partner with NGOs for this reason. The third is in the case of intellectual disabilities and challenges, we need the strategic partnership. In that case, those NGOs assign a special educator to spend time on our premises during the traineeships, supporting us and teaching not only those candidates, but also teaching our managers how to further train a person who's autistic or has Down syndrome or whatever. So there's a two-way teaching that special educator is doing. This involves a lot of their time. So the strategic partnership requires that NGO to say, yes, we are up for the task and we're going to send our special educators to you and we're going to, provide time. So these are the reasons why we partner with NGOs, the various reasons.
Thank you so much. So I'm just going to say there are one or two personal queries, and perhaps we may not be able to address that in today's interaction. Maybe we can connect separately with you and
maybe you could gather a list of those personal queries and send it to me.
Sure. I think there are many questions, and I fear that I'm going to be missing out on some of them. But
I saw one about remuneration right now.
Yes.
So just to answer your question, yes, they are paid the same amount. Well, this question is a little biased, is what I'd like to say, that during COVID, who loses the job, able-bodied or disabled? We don't think like that. So firstly, nobody lost their job. Some people quit because they had to go back to their hometowns where we did not have a hotel. So they chose to quit, obviously. We didn't ask anyone to leave, not a single person, able-bodied or otherwise.
Thank you. That's an excellent response, really. I think there's also some question about, is there some way such training can be done much earlier? And I think that might not be something that you can address from the Lemon Tree perspective, but perhaps this is something that NGOs or rehabilitation centers or other organizations
and the government. MSJE, the Ministry for Social Justice and Empowerment, they should be looking at this exactly. In fact, what the NSDC is trying to do through the Skill Council for Persons with Disability, of which our chairman was the founding chairman of that thing, and then after 2 terms, he had to stop being the chairperson. So now somebody else is. So I still work closely with SCPWD. Their goal is this only, to provide skilling and training to people with disability throughout India, not only for mainstream employment, but also for self-employment. They help in both the areas. So it's organizations like that that can support it. But yeah, Lemon Tree to go and impact the school system, that's a little big. I don't know how we can do that.
But perhaps as people hear about your success story, then it may seem more doable. It may seem one can learn from your model, and perhaps it can be implemented by other
which is why I was saying, Poornima, we are very open to best practice sharing with other companies. I know on today's session there are no companies, but I'm saying we are very open to that.
Right. I'm sure as we put this session later on YouTube, we'll make sure that various people access this, and I'm sure that you will hear from various organizations. I had one small question from my side. I'm wondering, Lemon Tree is a relatively large organization. I wonder if there are smaller organizations. Do you have any guidance to offer them? How they could start implementing?
Yeah, it can be done even on a small scale. So we have spoken to sometimes to companies that are 500 people strong or maybe 1,000 people strong. And we have given them also inputs, and it has worked quite well, actually. So it's possible. The size doesn't matter. A single standalone restaurant with a team of 30 people, they can also go for inclusion and get 2 people who are differently abled. Did you all see that video? I think it came out in 2020, if I'm not wrong. The Sting song, it was around Down syndrome. And it was about the baker. Absolutely fabulous. Let me just see, you have to see that, because that's about how people can learn from each other. I'm just going to see if I can find it on YouTube right now, and I will put it here on the chat. Just 1 second. It's a song sung by Sting, the famous Sting. And the video is around people with Down syndrome and how different employers learn from each other to go for it, basically.
I can also see that There's some information about other charitable trusts and organizations that have been employing persons with mental illness. And I'm sure that this is an opportunity for various organizations and people to connect with each other. And I hope you can do that after.
In fact, I'll
talk.
request you to send me the feedback. If you want to mask the name, that's okay. Just for me to see the different kinds of feedback, because I couldn't read all the items right now.
Yes, we'll save the chat and we will share
just save the chat
feedback.
And me. That will be very nice. I am just sharing the link. I think everyone who's attended this session has to see this wonderful, wonderful video. Yeah, it's called the hiring chain. Here it is. I'm just sharing the link. My Wi-Fi seems to be working a little slowly at this moment.
I hope I haven't missed any questions from anyone.
Just take a look while I'm copying the link and putting it there. And this is a very simple idea, which is so beautifully executed. And of course, nobody can be better than Sting. But whoever made the film really made it well. And
I think there is one more. Sorry, I think there's one more question about difficulties and challenges in training, but I think you addressed many of them through your talk.
Well, yes, we do face challenges. You have to keep working with them. So it's the YouTube link I've sent right now. You guys can see it later. Just copy it.
Thank you so much.
Great. So even if there are some more questions about how this works, you can send them to me on an email. I'll answer. Plus, if there are individual queries, if you could just put them together, then and get that person's email ID, then I can try to address that if I can.
Okay. I think one session is not enough. and I'm sure we want to know so much more, but thank you so much. I know you have fitted this in the middle of a really busy schedule.
It is a little crazy, yeah.
Yes. So thank you very much. Thank you to all the participants for staying on, for asking, for participating. And for all of us have learned a lot and we'll stay connected. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Take care, everybody.
And thank you to Akash and Kiran, who worked a lot behind the scenes to get everything organized and in place.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.